Live.
Hey the moment friends! Andang here for a very special chat. And it's called Adapting Tolkien. And basically we're going to be talking about the different ways various people here on the call are adapting Tolkien. And so we have quite the crew here. I'm just going to go in the order of the pictures here down at the bottom. And so that means, Corey, you're first up. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor. I am also president of the Mythgard Institute, and really happy to be here. I've been sort of spending a lot of time talking about adaptation, so I'm interested to sit here and talk about adaptation with you guys and sort of compare tonight. That should be fun.
Awesome. All right, and next up is Aaron. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Aaron Drake. I run the channel Pixelich, and I do a show called The Lore of the Rings and another smaller show called Did You Know Loader?
Awesome. And Terry?
I am Terry Adwin. Most people that are in the chat, if you know me at all, will know me from Lotro Players and Lotro Players News. And I am a editor on the Middle-earth Lore series and sort of Andang's right-hand person at the moment.
Yeah. All right, and Ron.
Hey, I'm Ron Newcomb with the Forge Studios. A few years back, I did a film called Rise of the Fellowship, where we were able to utilize the Lord of the Rings online video game in it, and kind of a modern adaptation, if you will, a little bit parody even of the stories. So that's kind of my lens I'll be looking through.
Awesome. And Trish.
Hey, I am Trish Lambert. I am producer of the Silmarillion podcast and a co-host with Corey Olson on that, along with Dave Kale, our third co-host. I am a writer and also a quality assurance person on the Middle-earth Lore series, and I keep butting myself into other places, wherever Andang will have me. And I'm a fan of Rise of the Fellowship, although I watched it before I started playing Lotro, so now I need to go back and rewatch it. But even not having played the game, Ron, I love the movie.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. And yeah, I'm a big fan of the movie as well. And so I am actually Andang, for those that don't know. You're on my channel. And I'm the director of Middle-earth Lore, which means I do basically everything that needs done in the project that isn't being done in a timely manner, and keep track of it all, and also do all the filming and editing. So, lots of fun. And for those that don't know, Middle-earth Lore is a video project that basically tells the lore of Tolkien from a perspective of the area of which it's being told in a mini-series on YouTube. And it has been a lot of work, as I'm sure all the adaptations here have been. So let's actually start with Aaron. Why don't you go a little bit more in depth into adaptation and kind of your process of making an episode, and just generally the whole process of how you do your adaptation.
Sure. Well, for starters, I suppose when we started this series, I was looking into starting a YouTube channel, and I have been for a really long time. And my girlfriend Jessica, who's not here, she'll probably show up in the middle of this at some point. She was the one who wanted to do a Lord of the Rings series where she was just going to sit in front of the camera and like talk about whatever came to her mind. And at the time when we were talking about this, yeah, well, we're still probably going to do some of that too. But I just graduated acting school when we were talking about this. So I'm like, well, if we're gonna do it, let's do it right. Like, we'll get a good camera and lighting, and we'll do actual episodes. We'll do real YouTube stuff. And she's like, okay. So really, like, it was her idea, and then like my ambition to want to start a channel. We did that. We just decided, well, where are we going to start? We're going to do. We decided to start with the Silmarillion and just go through it from point A to point B in order, so we could have everything broken down into small chunks. You could know when it happened in the book, and like if you wanted, say, to know, like our most recent episode was about the Silmarils, to be like, I want to know about the Silmarils, you can go into our channel and be like, Feanor and the Silmarils, click that section and it will tell you exactly how that
Wow.
part of the book took place. And it's because the Silmarillion is a little bit of a... It's a great book, and I love it, but it's kind of a dry read. It's literally like reading the Bible. It's kind of hard for some people to understand, especially younger fans. So we decided that we wanted to break it down and make it easier for them. And so when we make an episode, Jessica writes up all the lore for me in a big blocky text sheet. And then I take that and I turn it into a script for us to both read, and I decide who's going to say what. I give her the really hard words because she's a linguist. Well, hey, she loves that part, so that's fine with me, man. Which her being a linguist explains why she loves Tolkien so much. And it definitely actually makes it easier on me when I don't understand something and be like, can you explain this to me? And then she'll break down the etymology and everything. But so yeah, so then I'll turn it into a script, and then we have to be home at the same time together at night, and we'll film an episode specifically after 5 o'clock, so all the construction's done, and I don't have to listen to, I don't have to edit out like construction sounds.
Right.
Yeah, and then once we're all filmed, I spend the next couple days editing it and then uploading it, and that's about our process. It takes depends on how long, usually 5 to 6 days.
Awesome. And you've been at this for quite a long time, actually.
Yeah, I think we're at about 1.5 years now, which I wish I had more episodes for as long as we've been doing it, but since we can't do it full time, I do have to have blocks of time where it's like, okay, I'm doing this week.
It's really time consuming.
Yeah. And I did have a couple other guys who were helping me with the filming and editing side originally. They're off busy doing their own stuff. They got me started, which is great. And so now it's just us, though. But like the filming takes about the same amount of time. I just have to like do the camera work by myself. And if the camera shuts, the last episode we did, the camera shut off on me at the last like quarter of our script, and I didn't hear it. So like we had to reshoot the whole last end of the script, and I was already grumpy and angry.
Oh, jeez.
Man. All right. Well, Corey, you have been doing a few, well, probably a lot of things to do with adapting Tolkien. Two in particular come to mind, though, your Hobbit podcast and also your new podcast that you've started up. So since you and Trish are both involved in that, I'll let you pick one, and she can explain the other.
Okay. I'll just kind of start with the sort of the background, the sort of the kind of the intellectual background, kind of how I got to where I am, and what it has to do with the rest of what I do, and then I'll let Trish can talk about what we're actually doing now and working on. So. Basically, I'm an English professor. I'm a teacher. What I love to do is to sit and talk about the books and sort of walk people through the stories. Especially when I published my book Exploring J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit back in 2012, and it was kind of right around then that I had this kind of identity crisis where I was like, what is it exactly that I do? Because people kept calling me a literary critic, and I hate that word. Like, I'm not a critic. The whole concept of being a literary critic, like that word as applied to what I do, comes from the 18th century when you had guys who were professional literary critics, and their job was to read all the books in advance and tell everybody else what books were and were not worth reading and why they sucked or why they didn't suck. And that is so not my job. I actually strongly dislike that. I dislike reviews in general. I neither write them nor read them. That's not what I do. And so I was having this problem. Like, how do I explain who I am? How do I explain what I do? What is my relationship with this? Because really, especially as I was writing my book and really doing this, this sort of, my in-depth study of The Hobbit chapter by chapter, this was also kind of suggested to me by my son, who was 4 at the time, and he asked me what I was doing when I was writing my book, and I said, I'm writing my book about The Hobbit, and he looks at me and he's like, Dad, The Hobbit is already written. Why are you writing a book about a book that's already been written? And I'm like, God, that's a really deep question. I don't know how I can explain this. So anyway, it's as I think about, when I in trying to answer, which I'm still struggling to do, my 4-year-old's question, is just what exactly is it that I do? What is the relationship with the book that I have? What am I? I'm not claiming like I understand the book in a deeper sense than everyone else, and I shall clue you into the mysteries. It's not like that either. I feel like what I'm doing when I'm teaching, what I'm doing when I'm writing, is storytelling. Basically, sort of talking about the story, unfolding the story that doesn't get explicitly said. Unpacking things, because you're always, a writer is doing a lot of sort of suggesting of things without saying everything out. It's my job to kind of make those things explicit and kind of tease out some of those things which are really just kind of implicit and sometimes not even perhaps thought about or perceived by the author himself. So anyway, in thinking about that, one of the projects I was then sort of next doing was the long series that Trish joined me on, which we called Riddles in the Dark, and it was our long discussion, sort of at first anticipation and then discussion and analysis of Jackson's Hobbit films, and that was a really fascinating project because we're I've been doing the Hobbit, for my book I just immersed myself in the Hobbit for a long time. And so we basically kind of went through, but we're approaching the whole thing from the different question. The question we kept asking was, first of all, how do we think that Peter Jackson's going to adapt this? But then secondly, what would we do, right? What kind of challenges are there for taking this story and translating this story into a film medium, and sort of going through. And in the course of doing that, in the course of thinking through, so I was doing a lot of sort of thinking through the story, doing a lot of careful analysis and discussion of The Hobbit, thinking about some angles I hadn't thought of really at all in my book because of the kinds of questions that whole process raised. And I really fell in love with the whole question. The way that I found, the way that I was interacting with the story, the way in which I was imaginatively investing in the story, the kinds of questions, I guess you could say, that I was asking the story when I was thinking about how I would adapt it into film, were for me really fresh, and it was like looking at The Hobbit, afresh, which was pretty cool. Having just written a book on it, and had The Hobbit coming out of my ears for a couple years, to have what felt like a really fresh view of it was really pretty fun. And so as time went along, it's just thinking about that more and more as adaptation as sort of a natural extension of the kind of process everybody does when they read and invest themselves imaginatively into the book as they read it, right? You have to sort of, the reader has an active role to play, right, in investing imaginatively in the story. I as a non-critic, as an interpreter, as a teacher, my own imaginative investment in the story and the kind of connections that I'm trying to make, and the sort of the other kind of bigger pictures that I'm trying to kind of tease out of it, that also requires a different kind of investment, a different kind of relationship. And the adaptation, it's, to me, to take and to adapt the story seemed like a very natural. It's not the same thing, but related. I don't think it's it's not a question of just kind of leaving the text behind and doing your own thing. It's not just a question of like kind of riffing off of the text. It's really an interaction with the story, which I found to be very familiar, even though it was a different kind of thing. It felt a lot like the kind of work that I'd always done, and I found it really exhilarating. So that's why when The Hobbit ended, we decided to basically kind of continue in that same direction, but to do so totally untrammeled by reality or any other kind of external guidance of any kind, which seemed like the most fun way to do it. This is the point at which I was going to turn things over to Trish, but she seems to have been abducted by the board. I can't confirm that, but looks like that might be what happened here. So, should I carry on and explain in the absence of Trish, or?
Well, I think first, I really enjoyed listening to you guys change your opinion of
Yeah.
not only what adaptation should be, but what you like. You basically change your total opinion, and you go away from the book because you're like, that won't work in this medium. And
Yeah.
in a large part, you're right. And so, if you want to talk more about that first.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, there's so many things. I used to be, and I've told this story, at times before. When I was younger, when I was like in high school, I was an insufferable purist, completely insufferable, and I am so glad that Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies did not come out, like 10 years earlier, or I would have been like at the forefront of those purists who are just like outraged and like burning Jackson in effigy for screwing up the story. I absolutely would have been there. But yeah, it really did. My opinions on this really did change, because again, in the process of actually thinking through it in as much detail as we were going, episode by episode, we would take not like chapter by chapter through The Hobbit, but we sort of went, kind of story bit by story bit, looking at the different scenes, the different characters, the different things as they were unfolding in the story, and saying, okay, what would we do with this? How would we translate it? There are so many things that you just take for granted. When you kind of vaguely imagine as a fan, you kind of vaguely imagine this book that you love being made into a movie, right? And so you have this really indistinct idea that somehow the experience of seeing this thing on the screen is going to be just like your experience of imagining it in your head as you read, except awesomer and cooler, right? But when you actually break it down, when you really think it through, as we were compelled to do during the course of Riddles in the Dark, we find it just doesn't work. There's so many things that, the way that, just to cite one of the most obvious examples, the role of the narrator of a story, like the narrator of The Hobbit, in establishing tone and telling us what's going on, and telling us what's going on inside Bilbo's head and what he's thinking and what he's remembering about at that time. You get, without the very, very heavy usage of enormously cheesy voiceover, you can't do that on a film. You've got to make it visible instead of just telling people about it, which is the medium of books, but it's not the medium of TV. So, there were so many moments in The Hobbit story. In fact, one of the kind of ironies that we were thinking about, almost all of the most important moments, sort of turning point scenes in The Hobbit, happen in pitch darkness. There isn't a speck of light anywhere. Talk about your film adaptation challenges, right? But again, and that's only, in a sense, only sort of an externalization of this fundamental problem, right? They all were internal and usually not even in dialogue with somebody else. And so the question, how do you approach that? What do you do? How do you convey something like the things that are being conveyed in the book, and yet in a way that actually works in this medium? And I will say, for as much as I was ultimately disappointed by the way things didn't come together at the end of the Hobbit trilogy, I was, just on this particular topic, I was deeply impressed by the Bilbo having pity on Gollum scene in film 1 of the Hobbit trilogy. The way that Jackson actually does accomplish this non-verbal depiction of that scene, where he's just through the facial expression acting of Andy Serkis and Martin Freeman, we can see, what's going on in Gollum's head. We can see the whole process that Bilbo goes through of, like, I've got to kill it, and then, like, no, and then his doubts, and then his choice to have pity and his leap in the dark. That was accomplished by, way better than I possibly imagined they actually would succeed in doing that. So that was pretty good. But yeah, there are just so many points, when really thinking it through in ways that I had never done before, and that series really compelled me to think through this stuff really carefully on a sort of scene by scene, character by character basis. It really kind of opened my eyes to how interesting this whole adaptation challenge is. It presents this whole new set of sort of parameters for storytelling and interpretation. What kind of story are you going to be teasing out? Because again, it's about storytelling ultimately, right? Just like me when I'm writing my book or when I'm teaching my classes, what I'm trying to do is get at is a story, and that. Of course, that's what you're doing when you're doing an adaptation too. Again, I feel like those things are really sort of fundamentally similar. And Trish, though she was released on furlough, has now been taken again. It seems. Very sad.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and talk about the Silmarillion project?
Okay, so as the Riddles in the Dark series was coming to an end after the 3 full years of broadcasting that we had done every 2 weeks, talking about the Hobbit, both our analysis of the Hobbit films and our, and of course, it was really, it got to be a lot of fun, of course, because having spent 6 to 9 months of solid discussion of our way through the book and what are the challenges and how are they going to do this, whenever the studios actually started to release material, we had so much to talk about because we'd thought it through in so much detail. So whenever the first trailer was released in July, we would spend 3 hours going through the trailer frame by frame and talking about all of the implications of the choices they're making that we see. It was really fun, but that did finally come to an end, or was threatening to come to an end, and we were deciding what it is we were going to do next. And I decided I was having so much fun talking about adaptation like this, and of course, as time went on, especially as we went from film 1 to film 2 to film 3, all 3 of us, Trish and I and Dave Kale, our third co-host, became sort of increasingly impatient with many of the decisions that Jackson was actually making, and we came more and more to like our own adaptation choices better than the ones we were actually seeing on screen. So we just said, hey, you know what would be even more fun? Let's do more conversation like this. Except we don't need Peter Jackson, right? So we decided we're just gonna take the Silmarillion, and we're going to go through the Silmarillion, and we're going to plan a film adaptation of the Silmarillion all ourselves. So we're going to do basically the Riddles in the Dark treatment, except without Peter Jackson as a touchstone. We're just sort of doing our own thing. And the Silmarillion was especially fun for many of the reasons that Aaron was saying before, but also just because it's safe. Because nobody is ever going to do the film of the Silmarillion, because no one is going to pry the film rights out of Christopher Tolkien's cold dead hands. So I'm fully anticipating that a feature film Silmarillion will never happen in the lifetimes of any of us. Perhaps maybe our grandchildren will one day see it, but I don't know. So anyway, it just seemed like, hey, look, there's another opportunity. Let's have fun, sort of pretending to do this thing which we're never going to actually be in a position to do. So we decided to plan it. We decided we're going to do the Silmarillion in episodic TV series form. And we're going to go through in detail from beginning to end. We've just began a few months ago. Just last week, last Friday, we did our first episode of season 1. We started with some sort of preamble season 0 episodes to establish some backgrounds and make some of the broad decisions of how we were going to do things. We started planning season 1. We did the plot overview. Season 1 of our theoretical Silmarillion TV show is going to go from the Ainulindale through the Awakening of the Elves. We're going to do a Valar-only season. No elves featuring in season 1 whatsoever. So we're going to...
You gotta have one elf at the very end. Like Daredevil in his suit. You gotta have one elf.
Yeah, no, exactly. We're going to do, the final scene of the final episode is going to be, seeing the elves from a distance on the shores of Cuivianen, right, to sort of set up the second season. And I think we decided the second season is going to end with the Darkening of Valinor. So we'll get the Awakening of the Elves, and then across Middle-earth, and then the third. I'm forgetting which one we decided. Was it the Burning of the Ships or the Kinslaying? I can't remember which one of those but it's going to be basically the fall of the the Silmarils and the fall of the Noldor and the Unchaining of Melkor and all that in season 3. So yeah, we figure it's going to, and since we're taking almost a calendar year to discuss each season, we figure we're going to be doing this. We're going to sort of bequeath this project to our heirs at some point, in 20 or 25 years. So yeah.
Awesome.
So
that's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot, and it's been great. We have a really active set of discussion boards where we have people not only making sort of plot and screenwriting suggestions, but we have people working on concept art and costume design and music composition and everything. So we're sort of in theory doing the whole thing. We're not proposing to film it. We're not actually proposing to publish a script. We're just talking. But that's the plan. Hey Trish, I just explained the basics of the Film project and where
I was going to say what he said. He said.
Where we are right now. I don't know if you want to add anything to sort of talking about the Film project. I just mentioned forums and people contributing. So
yeah, I'm afraid to because I don't know what he said already. But but it is really interesting. Actually, the thing that I think we have in common with the Riddles in the Dark and with Silmarillion, like for example, the last episode, we were really getting into Melkor's head.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in a way that you could never do any other way than by considering how would you dramatize, this portion of like the Ainulindale and the beginning of Arda. And as at the end, Corey was saying, I don't think I've ever looked at Melkor this closely before, and so it's a great opportunity for that kind of really intense, deep consideration.
It was so much fun. We're sort of thinking like, right, okay, so Melkor is not from the beginning in his first descent into Arda. Melkor isn't going to be all like, I am evil and I just enjoy doing evil things because that's what I'm like, and like that's not how he's going to be, right? I mean, we can even see it in some of the later portions of the Silmarillion, like Melkor's conversation with Hurin, right? We can still see evidence there that Melkor thinks he's the good guy, right? That he's the one who's been wronged by the Valar and they're the upstarts who have been, been usurping his rightful position and all this stuff. So clearly, certainly in the earlier days, he's going to have an even stronger kind of, rationale for this and feel like he's obviously the good guy who's just unfortunately being done wrong by everybody who's not understanding him right. So again, like, how do we depict that? How do we do that? How do we show, the journey? How can we get Melkor from, the greatest of all of the Ainur under Ilúvatar to, Morgoth in the north with his iron crown and, the king of darkness and shadows?
Great.
How do you get there? So yeah, it was so much fun. It was, and the way that it forces you to think through, elements and details in the story that that you just don't normally do. We spent a lot of time talking about like the implications of what is in one sentence in the Valaquenta, and that is the mention in the Valaquenta that before the descent into Arda, Melkor was drawn to Varda, but she rejected him. And that's right in the context, right after.
We're making a whole episode out of that one sentence.
Oh yeah, absolutely. At least one episode. Yeah, because Varda has the light of Ilúvatar in her face, which we're told, like the sentence before that. So again, like, what does that show us about Melkor and his motivations? Oh, it's so cool. So the way that adapting the story really prompts you not to just like spin off and do your own thing, but the way that it prompts you to dig in and really think about stuff which, when you're just being a comparatively passive consumer of the story, you just kind of let go by and maybe don't even really think through and flesh out. So that's what I've been thinking about.
The one thing we don't have yet in the Silmarillion that we did have in Riddles in the Dark is we don't yet have actors that we can make fun of. Like true. Lee Pace's eyebrows.
That's true.
We don't have that yet, but we will be casting a little later in the season. So
yeah, we are actually going to cast. I've heard rumors from our listeners that there's already a movement among them to cast The Rock as Tulkas. So we'll see. I don't know.
I want Stephen Colbert as Monway.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Or Mandos. He should be Mandos.
See, I would actually, with like the eyebrow thing he could do, he would make a good Mandos, I think.
Yeah, he'd be
better
great.
than Manway.
We've also been told no Johnny Depp. So
No Johnny Depp, yeah.
in this thing. So anyway, but yeah, so both of these exercises have just been really fascinating. And of course, as you can probably tell, the ulterior motive is education. You know, it's to get people interested in this, especially the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun as it unfolds. We have 20 years of job security, we figure.
Easily, minimum. Yeah, because we see no reason to stop at the end of the first age. So we're basically planning. We're planning to our series. Episode 1 of the first season of our theoretical show will be the Aino Lindale, and the final episode of the final season, whatever number that is going to be Sam getting onto the boat. So we've got a lot of ground to cover in between.
George R.R. Martin has nothing on us. I must tell you.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Ron, you have actually done, well, you're in the process of doing your second film regarding Tolkien-themed things, but you've done Rise of the Fellowship, and now you're doing The Rangers. So why don't you talk about those in order?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I hope when I'm long dead and gone that there's a group on Google Hangout talking as passionately as this is about my works. Certainly with Rangers, we're trying to dive deep into our own lore and create our own mythos, and having a lot of fun with doing that, as I'm sure a lot of people out there have dreamt about of what their world might look like. But with Rise of the Fellowship, it really is a standalone story about 4 geeky gamers that go on a journey. But once we got the opportunity and permission to use the Lord of the Rings online video game in the film, it allowed us to be able to draw a closer parallel and connection and parody at times, and, if you will, a modern adaptation. My buddy Skip likes to say it's almost like the way people have adapted Shakespeare over the years into a modern telling somewhat. So Rise of the Fellowship really has a lot of little nuances that a lot of Tolkien fans will get. Most people, it'll go right over the head, they'll miss it. But if you're a Tolkien fan, there's a lot of little gems in Rise of the Fellowship that you would appreciate, I believe. And that was very intentional to do, because we ourselves are fan and certainly inspired by what Tolkien has done for Rise of. So you can find that. I'll post it, but you can find it on Netflix and Amazon, and it's internationally now in several countries. We actually filmed back in 2009, so it's been a pretty laborious process. It's a 7-year overnight success type of thing. So,
Welcome to the film industry, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of par for the course, but the math is not adding up. I'll be like 98 by my 4th film, so I'm trying to close the gap on that. So with the Rangers, that really is my own story, my own idea, my own IP that we've created, and certainly inspired from Tolkien, but also a lot of different other things and other lore of adaptations and inspirations that we're trying to do a modern telling. It really, though, was what Peter Jackson did, his adaptation of Aragorn sitting at the Inn of the Prancing Pony in the films. When I look over and you see this ranger with his cloak, and we all know that scene, he's puffing on his pipe, and it's the cool light on his eyes, and the question for me was, who is this character? Now, certainly he's a Dunedain and part of the Rangers of the North and that lore, but in my own mythos, my own mythology, who is that character to me? And so I began to kind of go down this road of these elite rangers, and so I took a little bit from who I thought the Jedi were even, and now they didn't end up being that way, right, in films 1, 2, and 3. But we're hopeful for film 7 that they're going to get back on track the Jedi that we long for, and so there's even some of that. So the Rangers is certainly, if you're a Tolkien fan, you will immediately, it will feel very familiar and very much like home, and hopefully a lot of fun for people. But you also get to see new things and new adventures. Again, I think one of the things that I don't want to happen, and because we are jokingly serious when we say the Silmarillion is not likely to ever happen in our lifetime, and I completely agreement with that. But what I don't want is for fans to feel like that the best fantasy is behind us. when I feel personally as a storyteller and a filmmaker, and in fact the heart of Tolkien, wouldn't that be very orc of it if that was it? You know, or very, you know, much like Mordor, where that's all there is left to tell. And so I was inspired to have a new voice and to create a new voice, and that's what I'm trying to do, is create new stories. And it's not just me, you know, there's other people, there's some great guys doing some fantasy, a group called Airstream Entertainment out of Utah. A lot of people know Kate from Born of Hope is now doing her own fantasy series called Ren that she's doing over in the UK. That's going to be coming out. So I think we have a lot to look forward to. But as fans, you know, what I love about this type of fan is that it deep dives into things. And the Rangers, certainly, we've created that deep dive allowability from our map creation and our mythos and our own world creation and a lot of those things. I don't want to dissect off Tolkien, but we spent a lot of time in doing that already. I have notes going back to 4 years now. I keep finding like a further one back when I first started to write down.
Uh-oh, do we lose him?
Uh-oh.
Seems we did, maybe.
No.
No, run!
Man.
Fell into Mordor.
Oh. Yeah, he must have said something bad. He must have said something wrong.
Yeah. Censorship of Google, yeah.
I think it was the I'm not going to adapt from Tolkien, and then they're like, oh, get him! Got him down!
Well, hopefully we'll get him back. That's really interesting.
Well, he's on his
I was gonna say I hope his Rangers aren't going to be lounging against stone walls and sitting at campfires lounging.
Version, yeah.
Or like sending you on quests after letters that you already know they can't read. Yes.
You turned that quest around way too quickly, buddy. There's no way that.
There, he's back. He's back.
Oh, technology.
We said you must have said something wrong, and it just shut you off, you know.
The Tolkien estate has spoken.
Yeah, he was just making the announcement that he was going to be doing the Silmarillion adaptation. And shut him down.
I have no more. So sorry about that. Technology at its finest. While I was doing that and panicking, trying to get back to you guys, I could see that there were a few questions that came in through the chat. So
yeah,
somebody asked how many people worked on the Rangers. It was a Kickstarter campaign, and you know, with Kickstarter, it's kind of scary because you don't know if people are going to allow you to go down and create this world. And we ended up with 577 people, raised $58,000.
Wow.
Through, we had a little over 35 people that were like full-time crew. We shot over 10 days. We had 2 units, 4 cameras, 2 cameras apiece. But then we had another probably 30 actors, and at one point 150 extras. We had a town scene, a tavern scene, and so there was a lot of people that we had in that. I'm excited about what's going on. We have other stories that we want to tell too. Again, certainly inspired by, you know, given that freedom to kind of give a voice. We're doing a steampunk sci-fi western called Outlaws that we're doing. So it's a lot of fun. Again, a lot of stories to tell out there, but I digress. Rise of the Fellowship certainly is one of the reasons why I was invited on the call, certainly. And working with Turbine, with Lotro, was phenomenal. They set us up for success, and it has been a really good working relationship with them doing, you know, our little film, Rise of the Fellowship.
Yeah, but Ron, back to the. Well, I have a question about the Rangers. So 2 things. Where did you shoot, and when is it due to come out?
So it is out now. We are working.
Oh, it is out now? Okay.
It is, yeah. It's recently released. I certainly can send that link out to people. We're working on a little bit, even briefer cut, a little snippet, but we are shopping it around also because it is an episodic series that we'd like to do. You can tell a much greater story, a bigger character arc, a story arc, and an episodic. And so that's the format that we've done to do. So I could send that link around. So it is out now. We are shopping in hopes that it does get picked up someplace. But you know what? I'm not going to, regardless of what happens, we're going to keep making films and keep telling stories.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome. And this goes for everyone. You guys can email me your links and things for your plugging, and I'll put it in the description of this video so that everyone can see it after we're done here. Awesome. So back to Rise of the Fellowship. How does one get rights from Turbine to get their own server? I believe even you had, and make a movie out of their game.
Yeah, no, we definitely did. It was a lot easier back then when we did it. We kind of hit all things perfect timing, and I just asked. That's kind of the initial thing is I had the gumption enough to at least to ask. But the way I did it was I saw it from their point of view and tried to set them up for success, and so I did it with a marketing sense in mind. And so that's really the kind of angle that I did it from, and they saw it as well, trying to broaden their base. Now, this was before they were bought by Warner Brothers. But honestly, I don't know, not because Warner Brothers wouldn't want to, but just because they're kind of a big mothership. I don't know that I could get the rights now.
Yeah.
And so once we pitched the idea as a marketing opportunity, and Lotro saw that we were not only fans are going to treat the film or the game right in the film and present it well, then we flew up there, met them up in Boston. They were great. And again, they pulled out all the stops. They gave us Uber gear, our own servers. We had like godlike powers. We could fly all over Middle Earth and see stuff that was in development. And it was crazy cool. So it was a lot of fun. It was funny too because in the film we're trying to like kill each character, but we had to really set it up like a movie. And right before the person dies, if you didn't want them to die, you're trying not to kill them suddenly and going back. And
I feel your pain.
Yeah, the way the game is depicted in the film is not exactly like how the game is actually played. Like we've had people say, "Where is this tournament?" And in the film we created this fictitious Lotro tournament. And so we would love for Turbine to do a tournament.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. That would be awesome. But I don't want to falsely sell that either. So that was a little bit of our own adaptation even within the game. But they were great. And we simply, one, we asked. Two, we saw it from their point of view. Three, they knew that we were going to take care of their precious entity. And then, doing all the right things, going through legal, doing what they asked us to do. They got to see things as it went along, and so doing, again, treating it with care, I think, was the other kind of element.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Terry, since I've been the host, I'll let you explain Middle-earth lore.
Well, thanks so very much. Middle-earth lore was your idea. Why do I have to explain it?
Because you've been so quiet this whole time.
You've been quiet the whole time. I want to make sure that you get your chance to talk.
Make it up. He's giving you the floor, girl.
Fake it till you make it.
That's right.
So Middle-earth lore is basically taking Tolkien's work and breaking it down into even smaller bits than Aaron has done on Lord of the Rings, because we're trying to do our episodes in about 5 to 10 minutes. Our first episode ended up being a little bit longer than that, but that was the Shire, so kind of have to. Because you just can't break down the Shire in 5 minutes, because hobbits.
Thankfully, we didn't break down the Shire in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta have second breakfast, and then thirdsies and fourthsies, and lunch, and afternoon tea, and then...
That's right.
We managed to get it in under 15 minutes, and that was a challenge, because before Anding got hold of me to start editing the script and working it into some kind of order that we could even call it a workable script that we could film from, he had been working on this project with a number of other people, and it had sort of lain dormant for a while, so it hadn't been touched in a while, but before it hadn't been touched in a while, like 5 other people had just put a bunch of stuff that was copy-pasted from various sources on the internet directly into, so it was a lot of finding what was repeated and weeding out bits and pieces, and I was tearing my hair out, and he was getting more and more writers coming on, and I'm like, I have no idea what we're doing. So So that was our first episode. By episode 2, we sort of figured out who was doing what and where everybody's talents were going to help out the strongest. And now, script-wise, we're up to episode 8 and 9 and like 14, I think, in the actual folder.
Yeah. And so
then, how many people?
Take it from here if you want.
And how many people are doing this? Because it's a large team of people.
It is. There are over 25 people that are volunteering. That does not include in-game actors. So it's a large number of people to organize and make sure that everything is going all right and keeping the ship afloat. So to backtrack a little bit, Middle-earth lore is basically telling the lore of a specific area as that area would tell it. So for example, for the Shire, we're telling the story of the Shire as if hobbits were telling the story. And so they don't care that, Boromir dies and, all the other stuff that's going on.
It's my favorite part of the movie. I absolutely love the synopsis of The Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Frodo and the hobbits got to Rivendell. After that, they went to the Cracks of Doom, and maybe something else happened, but whatever. Yeah, Frodo and Sam got to the Cracks of Doom, and then now let's tell the good part. Then they came back to the Shire, and that's when the story gets good, right? I mean, it was awesome. I love that part of the movie.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a different perspective than has ever been taken, and I think that's probably the most original part of our series. But for those that don't know, we are doing a video series using The Lord of the Rings Online as our visual medium to tell the story of Tolkien's lore. And so we're not telling any of the lore from Lotro, but we are using it as a convenient place for actors and things like that. And we even have in-game people that are organizing scenes like where we're going to be filming, and setting up actors and planning out what emotes are going to be used and all these details that you have to plan out to get this series to work. And Ron, when you were saying making sure people don't die, I was doing Third Age Total War. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a mod for Medieval 2 Total War. And it's a giant battle simulator that has been done in the Peter Jackson art style. And you can actually fight these huge battles. It's very hard to make hobbits win battles against orcs. Just like to point that out. And so you have to make there be more hobbits than orcs, which there were actually more hobbits than orcs, thankfully, in the Scouring of the Shire. Otherwise, we'd be in trouble, I think. But it was a big challenge.
Not the Scouring of the Shire, in the Battle of the Greenfields you're talking
Battle
about.
of the Greenfields.
Battle of the Greenfields, yeah. And so it's very challenging to make sure that the right side actually wins. And so I feel your pain, very much so. What else, Terry? There's a lot of stuff to our project.
There is a lot of stuff to our project. Basically, and Anding has discussed this with Corey already in a podcast version, but it goes from a researcher who fills up our script with bullet points, and then the writers who take those bullet points and put them into paragraphs and sentences and actual story. And then the script editing team comes in and cuts all of that down into something that's only going to take about 5 minutes to say out loud. And then it goes to our narrator person, who is Braxwolf Stormchaser, who is in our chat. He's awesome. And it also goes to the landscape scouts and video people who actually go in through the game and will find places that Andang can film various scenes. And we have a whole team of storyboard artists, and Lily Kate does our casting. She finds who needs to play what. Trish and I actually have hobbits that are involved in here.
I play Pippin! Yay!
Yes. He plays Pippin and I play Mary.
At some point, actually release behind the scenes, because
some of the filming sessions
that you guys have playing hobbits and role-playing as hobbits on a set. It's just...
I so channel Pippin when we are shooting.
You really
do.
do.
Riot.
And so hopefully I'll get some of those behind-the-scenes out about that.
And we actually, now, every Monday we go into game, and because we have to level up our hobbits in anticipation of the next episode they're going to be in. So like right now we're trying to level our hobbits so they could be in Moria without being attacked and killed every 2 seconds so that we can actually film in Moria. So we're in the process of doing that now.
Yeah, and back to the storyboard part. That is our largest team, and it's very, very challenging to find everything you need in Lotro and then also the mod as well. Because there's so much history that we're telling, and Lotro is in the spot of the Third Age. There's ruins and things that go back, and that's one thing that they've done really well, is covering and making sure that it feels like this real world, and there's all this backstory and stuff that you can just feel in the world. But not all of that is filmable, and so you have to think outside the box a little bit, and luckily we have landscape scouts that do that. And then, you know, Ron, you had godlike powers. We have to make sure that it's the right time of day, and Lotro has a day light cycle that are each about an hour. So
And
even
it's
if
not raining.
it's like broad daylight outside,
Right.
in Lotro it can be pitch black for another 45 minutes, and you have to wait for the sun to come up. And so it can be very hard to coordinate people to get together and film stuff ahead of time because of that. It's really challenging.
And the whole thing about, you know, like you hear about people making movies and say, we're losing the light, we're losing the light. I mean, that happens to us within like a 5 minutes time span.
Right. It's every hour with us. We're always using the lights.
I just wanted to say Jessica's home now. I'd like introduce her, and then she's
Oh,
gonna hop in with us. So
Come
say
on
hello,
over here.
this is Jessica.
Hello.
Look down. There
Hi.
you go.
Hello.
Hey
There she
Alright.
is.
I sent over the link to her. She's gonna join us in the chat on her PC, but I just wanted to be like, 'cause she doesn't have a camera over there, just see her face and go good.
Alright, so everyone picture that face for the rest of the hangout.
Pretend.
Alright, awesome. Well, that is everyone's adaptation. I do have a few questions that I want to ask each of you, and then we might get into talking about the good and bad of different adaptations like the Jackson films and things like that if we have time. So first of all, why did you guys start doing adaptation? Because it's very time consuming. I know everyone on this project takes a ton of their personal time to be doing this. Why do you guys do it? And let's start with Corey.
That's actually why I do it. Because, you know, I was looking for something to do that would take a really long time to do. In that way, that's one of the things that, you know, the Tolkien Professor podcast has in common with the Entish view of the world, you know, is that at the Tolkien Professor podcast, I don't do any discussion of Tolkien unless it's going to take a very long time to do it in. It's, you know, because why do it if it's not worth taking a very long time to talk about? So, so actually, it's you know, to me, it's always been about the detail of, you know, no, let's. I mean, I love going. So this is why, like, the people in my classes are always teasing me because I never cover half of what I set out to cover at the beginning of class, because whenever I start talking about something, I want to sort of focus in more and more and you know, look more closely and think more carefully about details and things. So. So that's what I love to do. So, you know, say, hey, yeah, let's think through the Silmarillion episode by episode for 20 years. That just seemed like a no-brainer. I mean, it's like the ultimate kind of extension of things. So, so yes, no, the far from being an obstacle, the consumption of massive quantities of time was really more of an end goal, really, as far as I was concerned.
All right, not the answer I expected. Okay, Jessica, since you have joined us,
Hello.
hi, welcome to the chat.
Thank you.
So we're going around asking why you started adaptation. So why you guys decided to start doing your lore videos.
Oh, yeah, well.
I ask myself that every day. Why did we do this?
I think you should turn off your microphone when I'm talking, because I'm picking
Yeah, it is.
two
echoing.
people talking in the same room. Yeah. Well, I've always been told that I am very good at explaining Lord of the Rings to, say, laymen, as it were. But my original idea for the channel was just to have me rambling at at the camera for like 10 minutes on any given topic. I broached that with Aaron, and Aaron was like, well, if we're going to do it, nobody wants to watch you ramble into the camera for 10 minutes, so let's do it properly. So that's how we ended up with our...
That's not what I said. I said if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right.
Which is almost the
Just
same
reinforcing
thing, right?
that.
In any case, so that's how we ended up with our current format. But I just really love talking about Lord of the Rings with people.
Awesome.
So.
And Aaron, do you have a different answer, or is it about the same?
Well, for me, like, I knew she had wanted to do this project for quite a while because we had kind of talked about it here and there. And originally, when I was planning my YouTube channel, I wanted to do like sketch comedy with a bunch of my actor friends, and actors are inherently flaky, so it was hard to get them to do anything. And then what am I gonna do? Like, I'd love to do Let's Plays and stuff, but they're a dime a dozen, and it's really hard to get anywhere with that. And Jessica's like, well, why don't we? You know, we talked about that. I'm like, well, what, do you actually want to do this? And she's like, yeah, let's do it. So I got together with some friends, we talked it over, and then we just started from there, and it's slowly becoming a thing now. So yeah, I needed something to latch onto, and she had that idea, and I thought, well, you're nobody that I knew up until maybe now the Tolkien professor knows more about Lord of the Rings than Jessica, which I would love to have a Tolkien off between you two guys. That would be awesome. That could be our next live hangout.
I volunteer as tribute.
So, but yeah, I mean, that was about it. Like, I wanted something to work with, and like, I still have some other things that I want to do on our channel. I've been wanting to do a video game show for a while, and I'm thinking about doing one that focuses on fantasy video games in the style of like JonTron and Peanut Butter Gamer and like Brutal Moose, like how they do their gaming stuff. And another excuse to like do more Lord of the Rings stuff, because you can just talk about Lord of the Rings video games that way too. So, yeah.
Awesome. One thing you mentioned is that that we didn't talk about earlier was that you have comedy in your videos, which is not always the thing you relate with the Silmarillion, and particularly the lore behind the Silmarillion. So how hard is it to include jokes throughout your episodes? Is that challenging?
I'm going to let Aaron field that one, the comedian.
For me, I guess it comes pretty naturally. I think more so good jokes, including good jokes, is what you should be asking, because most of my jokes are not. I think they're funny, but I know a lot of people are like, well, okay. But yeah, no, like, comedy is king on YouTube, so I wanted to include some humor, and again, like, that's something to appeal to the broadest demographic, because like I said earlier, like, we want to appeal to people who either don't know about Tolkien, or have a mild interest but not enough to read the books, or like maybe they read The Hobbit or just the trilogy but never even heard of the Silmarillion. Like, those are the people I'm targeting. So like, if you're going in there and talking about if you get too complicated for them, they check off. Like, if you watch your analytics, like, I can tell the points in my videos where my audience kind of either skips ahead, or because things, you know, tend to get, if they do get a little long-winded or whatever. Like, not everybody. I mean, we do have a big. Our demographic's really interesting for the people who do watch our videos. It's kind of all over the spectrum, even though our channel is so small, which is great. That's what I want, but especially want to cater to those people who like Lord of the Rings and want to know more about it, but don't have the time to read it annually every single year through the dates that the books actually take place. And
which is what I do every year.
That's why I'm staring at you.
I don't know if Corey does it by the dates, but I know Corey rereads it every year. So you're in good company there, Jessica.
That's impressive. By the dates.
No.
Yeah. Which is a funny thing in itself, because there are spaces in the book where like nothing happens for a long time, because like it's like a huge jump in time, right?
Like
So,
once they get to Rivendell in October,
Right.
they don't leave until December. So for 2 months, I don't get to read the books. But in September, I have to read like the first half of the Fellowship because there's a 17-year gap. So I'm reading like half the book, and then I just have to wait.
you wait
Yeah.
17 years to read the next chapter.
I just basically read up until the Shadow of the Dark chapter, all on like Bilbo's birthday, up until like when they leave the Shire. I read that all in one day, basically. And then in October, I have to stop for 2 months. The pacing is strange.
All right. And so, Terry, why did you get started in doing adaptation?
Well, because somebody asked me if I would be interested in helping with the video series. Because I may have mentioned that I have kind of a lot of time on my hands.
And little did you know.
And little did I know, yeah.
All right. Awesome.
But actually, Terry, you did a lot of RPG stuff back in the day, right? I mean, you've been around sort of a form of adaptation for a long time, right?
Not necessarily Tolkien adaptation, but
No,
yeah.
no, but just adaptation in general.
Yeah, yes, for quite a while.
Yeah.
In various fandoms before winding up in Lord of the Rings.
So it comes naturally to you.
Sort of. Bits and pieces of it come naturally to me. Some of it, it depends on the day.
It depends on the day.
Yeah. For me, this is kind of a tough question. Because it was such a long period of me actually starting the adaptation. So originally it was because I wanted to do a new kind of YouTube series, and I wanted to scratch the itch of creating content that's highly, highly edited and just doing video editing, because I really enjoy that process of editing video and taking this huge amount of material and weeding it down into something that can change your ideas on things or inform you, or be a really interesting piece of work. And so I had been doing that for a while, but nothing lore related. And I thought it would be interesting to do a lore YouTube series once I started searching for videos on YouTube. And I had found a lot of different things, but I hadn't found anything that had the visuals of either the films or Lotro heavily combined with the lore and doing it in a really nice way to get people involved. And so I decided I'd fill that gap. And then a little bit while later, I found Pixelich's channel, and you guys do awesome comedy stuff. So I'm glad to
Thank you.
have found your channel.
I just to say how awesome it is that you found us before we ever even talked. I think that's
Right.
really cool. And we live very far away from each other. That's just the power of YouTube and the internet. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really cool. All right, Ron, why did you get started in doing all this filmmaking adaptation stuff?
For me, it's, I feel that I'm a storyteller, and it's what I am, it's what I live and breathe, and I think a lot of people out there are creatives. I think along the way, we lose sight and forget that we were or are a creative, but we need that kind of rebirth, that reawakening at times to do that. So for me, I almost tried to give it up at one point and tried to say, okay, I need to focus on my regular 9 to 5 and grow up, if you will. But I don't want to. I so appreciate what Tolkien and many other fantasy writers have done, is that it feels right and in certain sense of truth that there is or should be a sword in my hand type thing, and I have adventures in my mind, and that's because that's the way life can hit us at times. And so for me as a storyteller, it's a part of the essence of me, and so I feel that if I don't do it, then some way a little piece of me has given in and died, if you will. I know it's a little bit cheesy at times, but I do feel that I'm passionate about it, because I feel that there are stories to be told, and I want to be at the seat of that table that are telling stories and know better than to look back and to see what Tolkien has done. I mean, look at all that he has inspired, and just that in of itself is an inspiration to step out, much like what he did. So that's really why I'm doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely get taking a break can be tough from it, and you almost really do feel like that you're dying because it's so addicting to be creating something that impacts people's lives or changes the way that they view the world through the projects you're doing, or even just having somebody watch your stuff is really entertaining, and going through the creation process is more fun almost than having people actually viewing your stuff, I think. So.
Oh yeah, movie making is a process, and you're changed in that process, and the creative of that. But when someone really gets it, a fan really gets it, the theme of Rise of the Fellowship is there's a little bit of geek and hero in all of us. We're all geeky about something, and we all have the ability to be the hero. And when people really get that and embrace it, it's empowering for people, especially the younger people. Our film is really targeted toward, it's a family-friendly film, so it's really targeted towards kind of a younger set, but certainly, it's something you can sit down with your kids and watch it and not worry about anything. But it's that theme of being geeky. When I first started penning it, Scott Matthias and Christopher Bunn and I, that's one of the things that we wanted to address and one of the challenges we wanted to face. And when people get that, it's a very much like an awakening moment, an empowering moment for them. So, yeah, it's nice to receive that.
Yeah, awesome. Trish.
Yes?
How did Corey drag you into all this adaptation?
Well, it is interesting, actually, because, I mean, first of all, it was just a chance to get to play in Corey's sandbox, which, I can't pass that up. But actually, the way I originally got into it was, originally, the first few episodes of Riddles in the Dark were just he and Dave Cale, because it was really their brainchild, so they were doing this. And I was an avid listener to the podcast, and it became obvious at about the 4th or 5th episode, I guess it was, that these guys were going to get inundated because so many people were writing, commentary about the episodes, and so it's like, you get to like episode 7 and you got to go back to episode 1 and 2 and 3, and talk about what people have said. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to get to like episode 15, and how are they going to do this, to talk? So I got a hold of Dave and I said, listen, I just want to be behind the scenes. All I'll do is just go through, and I'll be the person to like, go through all the commentary and the things people post, and I'll give you guys like a bulleted summary every episode. And I don't know what happened. It was all of a sudden it's like Dave's like, why'd you come co-host with us? I was like, okay. Oh, I know what. Well, I know one thing was Comic-Con was on that year. It was the year before the first Hobbit film came out, and so Weta and Jackson were big time, and I think Corey and Dave were both really busy that weekend. And I mean, I was peppering those guys with, and the latest news, and Jackson said this, and Jackson said that. So I think it was like Dave's like, we need to have her on the show. So that's
it quickly became clear that we were not going to be able to do without Trish. I mean, Dave and I have many strengths, but the strength of neither of us is organization. Like basically, the conversations between me and Dave in the 15 minutes before the episode almost always begin with one of us saying, so what are we talking about again today? Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So if it hadn't been for Trish, we would have lost our way long ago.
Of course, then last year, I guess it was, you and I would get on the phone like 45 minutes before, but we knew we were going to talk about it. It was just what are the riddles going to be?
Advanced planning. See, that's what Trish introduced. Right. That kind of advanced planning. Yeah.
But I think what I really enjoy about it, about both Riddles in the Dark and about the Silmarillion, is kind of like the flip side of the coin from what Ron was talking about, which is I'm really interested in audience reception. I mean, I'm interested in audience reception of Tolkien anyway, the books and how people relate to him, and sort of what different people have to say. And then also just I'm really interested in how people choose to adapt. How did they choose to adapt or use do that way. How did Jackson choose to put Erebor right next to Angmar? I don't know, but
and everything else, really. I mean, it's
yeah, I mean, you know, and so so I think from that standpoint, I really enjoy it because it's, and I actually did a paper where part of the paper was I researched like adaptations that took place while Tolkien was still alive, and like Humphrey Carpenter, who wrote his bio, he was the official biographer of Tolkien. He actually did, before he wrote the biography, he actually did do a stage adaptation of The Hobbit, which Professor Tolkien went to, where Smaug got killed at the Lonely Mountain, because Carpenter felt that was more appropriate. That was more true to the story, and I'm like, boy, what cheek this guy has. He's got Professor Tolkien in the audience, and he does that big of a change on a stage play. Anyway, Tolkien didn't like it very much.
Needless to say.
But anyway, so really interesting. And then also in the letters, the book of letters, Tolkien's letters, is a letter that he wrote about a, gosh, what was the guy's name that wrote a screenplay?
Oh, Zimmerman, yeah.
Zimmerman, yeah. And he writes his responses to the Zimmerman script. And the thing that I find interesting about that is that it becomes very obvious that Tolkien understands that, like he even said he would have left out Helm's Deep entirely.
Yeah, cut Helm's Deep was his advice.
Cut Helm's Deep. Yeah. Not the Ents, can't cut the Ents, but cut Helm's Deep, which of course Jackson chose not to do that. But it was just interesting because he recognized the challenges of adaptation. So the whole thing is just, to me, another another extension further in Tolkien stuff. So you were gonna say something, Corey?
No, I was supporting you about the Zimmerman comments. It is true. Right. I mean, it's easy to kind of miscast Tolkien, thinking of him as like this sort of stodgy old professor, which he did kind of sound like a stodgy old professor at many points, especially later on in his life. But he did get that, and he was fine with that. That Helm's Deep comment blows me away every time I read it. When I'm like,
right.
Seriously, you'd be okay with cutting Helm's Deep?
And he was like, it doesn't really move the story along, he says.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. It's really kind of extra. It's fine. So I mean, he did get it. It is interesting, of course, that after saying that, he goes through and absolutely cuts the screenplay to pieces.
Yes.
That's my favorite letter. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's just awesome.
Yeah.
But like his sort of understated exclamation point about Goldberry being made Tom Bombadil's daughter for some reason in the screenplay. And he just doesn't even comment on it. He's just like, let's move on.
I think my favorite are his comments about the Eagles. He always takes Zimmerman to task about the Eagles.
Yes.
And he says, what was his favorite line? He says, Zimmerman might think that he knows my Eagles, but he can't expect me to agree with him or something.
That's right.
Right.
So sassy.
Right. So that's just all interesting. It's like sort of how people interact with Tolkien's work, including Tolkien himself. So it's just a bunch of fun. I mean, the Silmarillion film project is great because people are so involved in it, and it's just really interesting to see all the different ideas people come up with for the adaptation. So it's fun, and as long as it continues to be fun, I'm in.
All right, awesome. So, follow-up question, and this is two that are kind of related. So, two questions. Why are you still doing adaptation? And what would you say to someone that might be wanting to get into adaptation? And let's start with Ron.
For me, it's probably a little bit different than what the rest of the crew is looking through. But again, I'll speak through the lens of which I'm here for. So for me, I am actually branching out into my own IPs, my own stories. But it's certainly, it's hard not to acknowledge, and nor would I want to, that Tolkien certainly was an inspiration. So what I have found is those creative stories, the stories that Tolkien introduced us to, really is a gateway and a doorway into other potential stories yet to be told. And so I personally am focused now on trying to tell other tales, just as epic, just as grand. Tolkien gave us a great framework, how to do it right, a great example of success, a great example of being humble. A lot of things that you can go back to, strong themes that you can look back on within Tolkien that you can certainly pull from in his works, but just depth also that he took, and I think readers really appreciate that. And so I'm trying to take, not necessarily adapting his story, but maybe his methodology of how he did things, and taking that as my own and kind of moving that into the stories that I wish to tell. So again, for me, filmmaking and creating our own unique IP with the Rangers, and stories, hopefully beyond, it will be lessons that I've learned versus a direct adaptation, and certainly what he did, the process of which he did, I'm going to be taking on.
Awesome. And it might be apples and oranges, but is it harder to do an adaptation of Tolkien like Rise of the Fellowship, or is it harder to do your own IP?
It's a good question. I think I don't want to give the cheesy answer. They're both different in so much respects, and equally both had their challenges. Every film will fight you every step of the way and not want to be made, and you'll have to pull a film into existence. Fight you. And so each film has its own set of challenges. Certainly being able to tap into an existing fan base, to easily identify our fan base with Rise, and to engage them was much appreciated. But certainly Rangers is like a new birth fawn trying to find its own footing, and we don't know if it'll stand or not. We don't know if fans are going to embrace it or not. The fans have to speak and speak up, and they do that by voting. How do we vote? We vote by our views, by our dollars, what we choose to back, and that will allow me to be able to tell further stories or not. And if the Rangers is not, we do have other stories that we wish to tell. So each in its own right has its own, but certainly trying to identify the Rangers even as its own standing IP, just because in the name in and of itself, people assume that there's we've even had to correct people and say, oh, is this in Middle Earth? And we say no, and they say, oh, what is it, a parody? No, it's not. This is our own unique IP. So certainly, even trying to identify and create something new has been a challenge at times. But I mean, what greater challenge? I mean, you're creating film. It's hard to complain. It's phenomenal stuff, and I love doing it. And when you get to do that, yeah, I'm not going to sit there and cry the blues. These are things that I want to have, and I hope I won't soon can not do my 9 to 5 and have these problems. Would be great. So I'm hoping to make films for years to come. So
awesome. Terry, why are you still doing this?
Well, that's a good question. No, for much the same reason as Trish said, as long as it's still fun, because it's an awful lot of work, but it is also an awful lot of fun.
Awesome.
And I get to work with some really great people,
Yeah.
and I've met some really awesome people.
That's right.
Cool. Is there any advice you'd give to someone that wants to start an adaptation?
Get help.
Get really good people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seek help. That's good
not,
advice, Terry. Yeah.
Not just in the sense of, there's something wrong with you, get help. No. I would recommend for anybody to not go it alone, because, again, it is an awful lot of work. You want at least one friend backing you up.
Hey, Andy, can I circle back? I hate to do this. I hate it when people.
No, that's fine.
Do it, but if you don't mind, I do want to answer that second part of the question for some filmmaker out there that's getting geeky excited about doing their rendition of the Silmarillion, because we're saying that it's never going to happen, and they're going to think, oh man, that's my opportunity, I'm going to do it. I will say that if you're a filmmaker and you're looking to adapt Tolkien's works into a project, I I don't do it. All right, just correct me. Don't do it. You know, the Tolkien estate, it owns the intellectual property rights of those stories, and they have sold them to New Line Cinema, which is owned by Warner Brothers. Those are some pretty big, hefty names, of which us little indie filmmakers, you know, the rights are sold to the film. So that's just kind of a short answer for it. If you're going to do, and I've seen some great filmmakers start to go down the road, and I've kind of presented them with some caution, and sure enough, you know, they had to stop.
Yeah.
So,
and it's only The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings whose film rights are sold to Warner Brothers and, you know, and their extensions. They can't do anything in the Silmarillion or any other work published, Unfinished Tales, Farmer Giles, I mean, nothing else other than The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And so yeah, it's going to be, like I'm telling you, there will never be, certainly as long as Christopher Tolkien lives, there is a 0% chance of any film rights ever being discussed with anybody. So stop thinking about it. Stop asking if Peter Jackson is going to do the Silmarillion. He's not. He can't. It's not possible. You know. And so yeah. Yeah.
I'm afraid that if he did get the rights to do it and they put him up to it, like, I'm afraid it would kill him, because, like, you saw what happened at the end of Lord of the Rings, and then when he got really sick and was supposed to do The Hobbit, and then was in the hospital forever, and they're like, well, maybe we'll give it to Guillermo del Toro, and they strung him along for so long, and then del Toro was like, well, I got other stuff to go do, and they're like, all right, we'll get Peter in here, and then he was, like, half dead on set for the whole first, like, if you watch the Hobbit behind-the-scene features, it's like the story of how Peter Jackson got fat again, because he was like so skinny and like grayed out, and like it was great because you could see him get healthy again. But it was like I don't know if it was just Lord of the Rings, to be honest, that did that to him, because it was such a huge undertaking. But like, man, if it was, it's like being president. You see those guys in those 4 years, how much they change.
I would encourage, though, if you're a filmmaker looking to present a story, create your own fantasy element. There's nothing wrong with creating an inspiration or something, but create it in your own universe. You know, there's certain things that you can't do, but there's certainly a lot that we can do. So embrace your own story. I think of filmmakers who are out there that have done it and, you know, kind of gotten their hands slapped. They would probably advise you and tell you the same thing. So if you're looking to adapt a Tolkien project, don't. But it doesn't mean that you can't tell your own story. So I just wanted to make sure I got that out there. Save people some heartache.
Yeah. All right, Aaron, since you're unmuted, you first, and then Jessica after that. Why are you guys still doing this, and what advice would you give to people who want to start adapting?
Well, I think like we keep doing it because it actually got when we started it, like I wasn't sure how many people would really watch our stuff, and it actually did. Our first few episodes did really well, and then we started working on we started getting a core audience. So like for them, I don't want to just disappear and stop making videos, because we do have a small group of people who watch every single episode, comment on all of them, and they're really great. Also because it's done some good stuff for me. I gotten us into the Google Toronto group because of my channel and some friends I've made through it. And because of that group, I've gotten to meet some very big YouTubers. We met Michael from Vsauce because of it. Derek from Veritasium. We've met, who else did we meet? I met ASAP Science, who are local Toronto guys, actually. I've made some great local, friends with some local creators here. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Batman's Night Out. It was a viral video from a few years ago where Toronto Batman was going around like yelling, "My parents are dead!" Well, I know him, and I know the guy who runs that channel now because of this, Sean Ward. I'm, acquainted with him, and just met some great creators. Made some great ins at Google. Like I have friends that work at Google. How cool is that? And I also just because I love creating, I love doing this. I've always been a fan of Tolkien. Like I've been into the Lord of the Rings since. I heard of it at the end of elementary school and in middle school, and like I read all the books, but like, it's because it's like without the Lord of the Rings we wouldn't have or at least it would be very different. We wouldn't have stuff like Dungeons and Dragons and modern fantasy and these types of things. But since I started seeing Jessica, and especially since we started doing the show, my appreciation and understanding of Tolkien has grown so much that every time we make an episode, I learn new things that I didn't before. Because like it's no secret that Jessica is the true like brains behind this operation, but it's definitely like I can hold my own in a Lord of the Rings conversation now, and it's pretty great. And I had this moment when I was having a conversation about Lord of the Rings with somebody where they were saying some things that were very not true, and I was like, well, actually this and that, and you're wrong. I didn't want to be like, well, you're wrong, but I was just like, well, wait a minute, I know things now. It's not just like I'm not just doing a show for fun anymore. Like, I actually know my source material now, and it's really cool. And as far as who wants to start an adaptation, don't. Like, I agree, don't do it. Stay. We don't want the competition. Get out of here. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Honestly, if you want to start something, or on whether it's Tolkien or not, my real advice is don't wait. Like, after you're done watching us, go start it tonight. Like, that's my real advice on that. Be it anything. And if you are going to do Tolkien, give us a call. Maybe we'll do collab stuff. I don't know. But yeah, that's my thing on that. And I'll switch you over to Jessica.
Awesome.
So he's muted now, so this should work. So I guess what keeps me doing it is what got me started in the first place, which is if you even mention Lord of the Rings in my vicinity, I will gravitate to you and start monologuing. So you might as well put a camera in front of me and have it recorded for posterity, because I'm going to do it whether or not I'm actually doing an adaptation. But it's been great to actually like reach a bigger audience, because I've always wanted to like improve others' appreciation of Tolkien, because I've always thought, well, damn, it affected my life so much. Everyone's sort of like, oh, well, I couldn't really get into it, or, oh, I watched the movies or whatever. So I've always been like, no, there's so much more to it than that. And just, hoping to, give people another outlet into their, appreciation of folklore and myth and fantasy and whatnot. So, yeah, so I just I'm going to be rambling about it, so I might as well, do it for real instead of just, talking somebody's ear off. Then I can talk many people's ear offs, and it's more efficient that way, I guess, more than anything else. Advice for adapters, I guess, find your passion would be my advice, and find your path into what it is that you're going to be doing. I mean, I know that's the essence of adaptation, but don't do adaptation because you feel like it's something that you should do, and it's like, oh well, I can't really do my own thing, so I might as well just do this. Find what makes you passionate about it and go that route. So mine would have been monologuing for 10 minutes, but just sort of find what it is that makes you passionate about it, and then it won't feel like a job or whatever. It'll feel fresh and vibrant, and you'll get excited about it.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Corey.
Well, I would say, as far as why I, continue to do it myself, sort of as I touched on before, I do it because it helps me see Tolkien's works, in a fresh new way that I haven't before. And I always see new things when whenever I teach. Sometimes people have asked me how can you go through and teach classes on the same books again and again and again, or even someone will say okay, you've been doing this for a long time now. Isn't Tolkien getting a little old yet? No, it's not, because every time I read it, every time I teach it, there are new things that you see, and it's always really fun. Well, doing adaptation has really kind of taken that in many ways to an entirely different level. As Trish and I were just saying, with the illustration of the sort of the analysis of the character of Melkor that we were doing in our last episode last Friday, that was some thinking I'd never really done all the way through before, and it was very cool. So that's why I keep doing it. as for advice, the main advice I would have is for people, whatever medium you're doing adaptation in, however you're thinking about it, I would challenge people to expand the way they think about their intellectual relationship with the source material. What I mean by that is people tend, it seems to me, from conversations I've had with people tend to think of sort of artistic expression or interpretive expression. Like basically, they're one of two things that you're doing, right? You're either taking the work and you're being faithful. That's the word everybody uses, right? You're either being faithful to the work, in which case it's not your intellectual work, right? It's not your imaginative work. You're just somehow kind of like putting Tolkien up, which is, it's not even true. It's not possible, right? That's kind of a really false idea. But anyway, so it's 0% you and 100% Tolkien, or you're just doing your own thing, right? And so it's like closer to 100% you, or maybe 80% you and 20% Tolkien. My advice would be to basically be willing to live in the middle there, to recognize the fact that any kind of, as I said before, whether you're reading on your own or whether you're, thinking through a story and translating it into a different medium, whether you're trying to figure out, like as Jessica in your 10-minute rants, right? You've got to choose which bits to talk about in 10 minutes, right? I mean, there's the same kind of critical process that goes into that. As goes into deciding how am I going to depict a scene, how am I going to translate this scene onto film. That kind of analysis, that kind of thinking through that you're doing, is really important, and it's not going to be 100% Tolkien. You're going to have to invest your own imagination into that and be okay with that and be comfortable with that, but also recognize that it's not just 100% you either. It's not just you doing your own thing. There really is, the world of adaptation is living in that middle ground where it's this sort of continual kind of dialogue and discovery between you, the picture that you have in your head, the story that you're telling, and the story that Tolkien was telling, and sort of, you want those things to really harmonize together and really resonate, but you can't either leave it behind or just try to be a slave to it. I mean, I'm tempted to radically misapply Tolkien's words from On Fairy Stories, where he talks about how fantasy allows you to be the lover of nature, not her slave, right? And I feel like that's kind of adaptation kind of works like that too, right? You need to be free to be the lover of your source material, not its slave. But so anyway, that's really kind of thinking about where you sort of sit in those things, and kind of working that through and being comfortable living there. That's the main thing I would sort of encourage and challenge people to think about.
All right, awesome. And in some ways, Tolkien was an adapter himself.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, almost all of his stuff, in one way or another, is essentially adaptation. I mean, Tolkien...
Or fan fiction.
Fan fiction, yeah. He was an awesome fan fiction writer. I mean, he wrote like Beowulf fan fiction. He wrote Arthurian fan fiction. He wrote he wrote Norse saga fan fiction all over the place.
When he does it, it's literature. When I do it,
yeah, that's right.
That's right. Yeah, so no, I mean, it's that's the sort of the irony in some ways of that I find when people who want to be really slavish, or sort of purists who get really offended when you sort of do your own thing with Tolkien's work. It's like, man, like this is what Tolkien himself did. This is where he lived. This is the tradition that he lived in, was taking stories that he loved, stories like the Kullervo story that is being published soon by Verlin Flieger. The story of Sigurd, and I mean all those things. The Arthurian story, his own version of the Arthurian story, and the way he integrates so many of those themes. It's because he loved those things that he was not their slave, and he was able to play with them, to adapt them, to change them, and to really kind of have them take root and grow within. And it's one of the things that makes his stories so rich. So absolutely, I mean, I think it's a huge thing to understand about Tolkien, and hopefully, in seeing that, and coming to see that, people can kind of gain a little bit more confidence in being willing to kind of live with Tolkien in the same way that he was living with his own sources, with the stuff that he loved.
All right, awesome. Trish,
What was the question again?
why are you still doing this? And what advice would you give to?
So the advice, and what was the first one? I'm sorry. The first one was.
Why are you still doing
Oh,
adaptation?
why am I still doing it? Okay. Well, I mean, I think I said it before. I mean, because it's still fun. So that's the easy one to answer. The second one I would say is, in addition to the really good points everybody else has made here, I think whether you're adapting Tolkien or anybody else, or doing your own subcreation like Ron suggests, you got to really know your source material. And what I mean by that is not just the story you're telling, but you need to know beyond the story you're telling. You need to know stuff that will never show up on screen in order to make your story realistic. I think or the other piece about knowing the source material is, thank heavens Peter Jackson had Philippa Boyens, because I think she was really the one that probably kept kept the banner of Tolkien going, so that he didn't get too, I mean, I just wonder how far afield he would have gone if she had not been around there. So, and I think that applies to your own material as well as adapting material. Know your source material. I mean, and be true, because basically, if it's a subcreation of your own, you've got to be true to your own subcreation. So I believe that in order to do that, you need to actually know the story outside of the cell of the film. It's gonna slop over, and there's gonna be pieces that the audience never see, but it's there, kind of thing. And I think in that way, I think you will be able to tell a much more well-rounded, complete story. So that's what I would add to what everybody else has said.
Awesome. Why am I still doing it? Well, I kind of just started, so that's part of it. And
Ask you again in a year.
Yeah,
ask
right.
me again in a year and see if I'm even still on YouTube. No, I'm just. I think advice I would give to a new person is, first of all, don't do it. If you're still passionate enough and won't listen to my advice, that's probably a sign that you might want to do it.
That's actually very good advice and makes a lot of sense.
And, whatever you're doing, you have to be passionate about it, whether it's adaptation or actually your own content, or, whatever you're doing, writing, videos, whatever it is, you have to be passionate about it. And as long as you're passionate about it and are enjoying what you're doing, I think that, you are meant to do it, so you should.
You made me think of something. There is a singer, I think he's still alive, named Harry Belafonte, who was famous like back in the 60s. And, he did a lot of, he's famous for the Banana Boat song, Day-O, and also Kingston Farewell. And I saw him
Always
on
reminds me of
stage.
Beetlejuice.
Yeah, I know. That's right. That's how people know him these days, from the Beetlejuice movie. That's right. And he was on stage. I saw him on stage a while back, and he told the story of that his mother told him when he was young and just his career was getting started. She said, "Love the songs you sing, because if you have a hit, you're going to be singing that song the rest of your life." And I think it's true of adaptation. Love the material you're adapting, because you're going to have that stuff in your face for a very long time. So you better like it.
And that's an interesting point, is that, I mean, some people go up to singers and say, "Aren't you tired of singing your same song over and over again?" But for the most part, they don't. But then when they hear of somebody talking about Tolkien for however many years, it's all of a sudden this thing that you can't believe that they're still doing. And I find that very interesting, and that it works that way.
It's a very good example of the singers not liking their own songs is Flock of Seagulls. The song I Ran, they hate that song because that's the only song anybody ever wants to hear from them.
See, that's a really good example of the opposite of what Belafonte did, right? It's like, do not make a song you don't like popular.
All right. Well, very quick speed round since we've been going for a while. I would like to know what your favorite adaptation of Tolkien has been, whether it be in Lotro, whether it be in your own material, maybe you want to promote your own stuff, or if it's the films, or whatever medium it is, music, whatever, your favorite, and also what you think didn't work so well as adaptation. So those two things, your favorite and what you think didn't work so well. And let's start with Terry.
Again?
Now, can I just clarify, we're talking favorite moments or like a favorite adaptation as a whole?
Particular moment that you think was adapted very well, or not adapted very well.
Can somebody else go first, pretty please?
Yeah. Is anyone
I'll go
ready
first.
to go?
I'll go
All right,
first.
Trish.
There's a lot I could say, but I'm just going to home in on one particular thing, and I think it's appropriate. Corey knows it's appropriate to the household that I have. Radagast. Okay, I think Radagast in Lotro is spot on. I mean, Radagast in Lotro is actually how I pictured Radagast in the books. The little bit I read about him. Radagast in the movie, not so much. Not so much.
Talking about the movie, and I was like,
no. I mean, I think Sylvester, what's his face, is a great
Sylvester
guy.
McCoy.
But McCoy. See, I don't even want to remember his name. I think he himself is a great guy. But I don't know. It just made me really uncomfortable for him to be so much the comic relief, and the eye crossing and all that stuff. I just was like, I don't know. I felt like they just disrespected him. Yeah, but I think in the game they do a really nice job, and I mean that's the Radagast that I choose to believe is the one in the game. That I think Corey may have said this. I can't remember if you said this or not, Corey. But if Tolkien had written more about Radagast, I think it would have been more in line with the Radagast that's in the game. So
Yeah.
All right, Ron.
My answer. Yeah, Radagast in the films were, I mean, it was rough. You go into the films because I did love Lord of the Rings so much, and I thought they nailed so much right. There was a lot of give that they had in my book, and I read an article that he was the Jar Jar Binks of the and I think that's about right. I mean, when I saw smoke come out of his ears, I thought, oh my gosh, what are they doing?
I know.
So, yeah, Radagast, I definitely think was a particular character adaptation that I wish that they didn't go down that road. Not only that, but then how they portrayed it was just, it was embarrassing. But the positive, it's hard not to have some love growing up in the 70s and 80s for the cartoons. Certainly there's a lot of love there for the cartoons, and I can't wait to show my little girls that. But what Peter Jackson did with The Lord of the Rings, all three films, to me was just as inspiring as what Tolkien wrote. I know that may be blaspheme for some, but for me, what Jackson did with the films was, yeah, it was just it was beautiful, it was poetic, it was definitely hitting it right, and that's why I was so frustrated when I felt like that he hit it, not so right. But hey, we have Lord of the Rings. I can go back and watch that.
That's right.
There you go. Terry, do you have an answer? Or do you want me to come back?
I do have an answer. So my favorite actual adaptation has got to be the Lord of the Rings Online, specifically the Gondor bits, because I think that a lot of what we're seeing in Gondor is probably the best stuff that they've done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my least favorite has got to be the trolls attacking the city of Dale in daylight. Because every time, the first movie, The Unexpected Journey, we had this whole lesson about how trolls turn to stone in the sunlight. So why do you have juggernaut trolls smashing down walls in broad daylight? It's just no.
But like the concussed troll is the bright spot of the whole third film.
It was
That was like the only moment of that film I legitimately loved.
Laugh. It was horrible.
I mean, it was really cheesy, and I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, whatever." But then, like, when the troll, got concussed and passed out. I was like, okay, all right, highlight of the film.
That was worth
the
it.
highlight of the film. Yeah.
And it's funny because I would have been okay with that moment had it not been broad daylight.
Right.
All right. Aaron, since you're unmuted, and then Jessica.
Okay. Well, before I say, I do have to defend Radagast a little bit. Not because I'm saying he was good, but because in Doctor Who, there's a line where River says, "I hate good wizards in stories. They always turn out to be him." And then it's a picture of Radagast. And like just because like Sylvester McCoy was a doctor and he was a wizard, I'm like, yes, crossover. Come on. But no, he was though not what he probably should have been. But that aside, Sylvester McCoy actually is a pretty good actor. But I do stuff that I did really love. I did grow up watching the cartoons with my grandpa, so there's a special part of that in my heart. And I'd have to say, obviously, I like our own content, youtube.com/pixelich. But really, I think my favorite is Return of the King, because that film is so, like, it's crazy scale, like what that film was, and what the time crunch that they had on that, and like how many Oscars it won, and all the crazy technical stuff that it did, and the fact that it brought modern fantasy into the mainstream, and it, like, I think, was that the first time that kind of fantasy film ever got an Oscar? It could be.
I think so. At least that many Oscars.
Yeah, especially that many. Has any films ever gotten that many Oscars otherwise? I don't even know.
That sounds like a Ron question.
I don't know. I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, you definitely need
Life
to look
of Pi, probably.
You know that fantasy almost never gets nominated. I mean,
Yeah.
look at Avatar, right? They go on and gross and break all these records, and don't win Best Picture. And fantasy is looked at from like society almost as just a secondary, funny little adolescent thing, but we know better. So
It's true. Well, and again, that's why I love it so much, because it's like now everybody realizes like how amazing stuff like that can be. And the picture of Peter Jackson at the table with all the Oscars lined up, that's like one of my favorite pictures ever. But yeah, other than that, it's just a great film. As far as my least favorite bit, I can't really say that I have one, though. We do love to make fun of why they chose to have Elrond deliver the sword. Like why? Why did you send him all the way there? Like he had before, apparently. I don't know. It's just fun to make fun of.
Well, as I'm sure Corey is thinking, it's only 10 seconds over there. And,
I mean, it's really the beginning of the end when it comes to geography in Peter Jackson films, right? Yeah, I mean.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, and Jessica.
All right, so I'm actually going to have to concur with Ron, because I actually got into Lord of the Rings through the movies. I started out reading the books, and I think I started a little too young, and I got to Tom Bombadil, and I thought, where is this going? And I just stopped. And then I watched the movies, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. So I went and read the books, and I never stopped, and now I read them once a year, every year, and, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to also continue on what Aaron said, and I think The Return of the King, specifically the lighting of the beacons, I think that is the best adaptation I've ever seen. So I will sort of take that a little further and say that Howard Shore's score is actually the best adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, I think, because it's pretty much perfection. I can't think of any way to improve that. And he's Canadian, so he's got that going for him as well. I think for my least favorite, it's got to be the ending of the third Hobbit movie. I have to say, I was extremely disappointed. Mostly because, like, that final battle, like, they tried so hard to make it epic, and just, like, by the end, you just didn't care. Like, so many people were, like, popping up that you weren't invested in, and then it was spending too much time on people that you were invested in but had very little to do with the actual story. And then at the end, Thorin dying, spoiler, I'm sorry. Thorin dies, and it's all very, very, dramatic, and I love the scene with Bilbo and Gandalf at the end, just sitting amidst the ruin, just sort of being like, well, That's over. But then afterwards, like, they don't even address that Dane is now king under the mountain. Like, do they deal with the fact of succession? Do they actually wrap up the story? They don't. And it's like, you've spent all this time being like, Erebor, 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 and now that they're actually there and they've actually won it and they've actually defended it, we don't even see that Dane becomes the king under the mountain.
Well, and not even just that. They don't cover what happens to pretty much any of the dwarves after the
Right.
battle.
Yes.
Or
yeah, that's true.
most of the characters. It's really just Bilbo from there on. And
Yeah.
it's
And
kind
even
of,
that isn't fully resolved, for crying out
No,
loud.
yes.
and that's
right.
really weird because the entire film has felt like the entire film trilogy to that point had felt like that it was focusing much more on the dwarves. And then to have the ending be almost void of them, if not completely void of them, is very weird, and it didn't work well.
I don't understand why they chose to do that, because the rest of it was so stretched out in order to make it 3 films, and the fact that they cut out so much important stuff, even though they were padding it with all of this unnecessary like extra stuff, and just like look at the ending to Return of the King. Like, yeah, people give it grief for being too long, but every storyline is adequately
Right.
wrapped up.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and you feel that sense of closure. Whereas at the end of the third Hobbit film, it's more just like, because it's the shortest movie out of all of them, and you can tell because they've cut out a bunch of the character stuff to make more room for epic battle sequences. Like, you don't even see Bard after a certain point. You know, he becomes master of Lake Town and, you know, all that sort of stuff, and you don't see any of that, and it's really frustrating because we waited for so long to get this adaptation. I almost wish they would have waited longer to make it, but, you know, corporate politics.
Or maybe just give it to Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, I
There
would
you
have
go.
loved to see what he would have done with it. That would have
Yeah.
been really interesting.
Yeah, same. I would have loved to have seen that. Just for the record, the Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. There was 3 other films that won 11 Academy Awards, but they had the largest suite. They won 1 in each category. So
Wow.
that's done before.
Wow.
Wow.
By the way, I want to go in. I have one other favorite scene I need to say.
Okay.
I think that the Scouring of the Shire in Middle-earth lore is the best Scouring the Shire I've ever seen.
And also the only Scouring.
Nice.
I have a note about that scene, actually, because when we were writing the script for the Scouring of the Shire, because of course you have to do the Scouring of the Shire if you're going to get into the lore, we had gone through the script and we'd gone over it a couple of times, and there were all these facts about how many troops were involved and how many numbers and this maneuver and that maneuver, and it was all very militaristic. And at the time I was actually in the process of finishing up The Return of the King. So in the midst of editing out all of what I could edit out of the Scouring of the Shire, I read the Scouring of the Shire and the Return of the King, and it turns out that our version is actually more serious than the silliness that happens in the book.
Yes. Because Hobbit.
One of the most ridiculous scenes in the book. It really is.
Well, and when we were doing our adaptation, I was surprised how much militaristic combat goes on in the Shire compared to Bree, where really Bree is like the peaceful Shire as far as wars go, and the Shire is like this terrible land of war by comparison.
Right.
And I found that very interesting because it's not what you think of as when you think of the Shire, but Bree got lucky and avoided a lot of conflict throughout the years. So Corey, what is your favorite and least favorite adaptation?
Well, I have to say that still after all this time, my least favorite adaptation ever is Treebeard in the Lord of the Rings films. I find Treebeard in the Lord of the Rings films utterly unforgivable. Most of the people that I know who still kind of carry grudges, adaptation grudges, are mostly focused on Faramir, and I get that. but I actually think there are redeeming elements to what he does with Faramir. They may be inexcusable for the real Faramir fan, but they work within the film itself. What he does with Treebeard, there isn't even a bad excuse for it. To make him into, I actually feel, I agree about Radagast, of course, in the Hobbit film, but there at least violence wasn't being done to something awesome. Just something awesome in potential concept, right? There was unfulfilled awesomeness as opposed to awesomeness wrecked, like what happened with Treebeard, in that making Treebeard into comically boring and an imbecile was just inexcusable. So that's my least favorite moment for adaptation. For most, of course, I'm tempted to say, because I don't want to overlook completely the fact the way in which, in particular, the visual design, and Jessica, I agree about your point about Howard Shore's score as well. The effect of seeing The Fellowship of the Ring in the theater for the first time, and the amount of time I spent and remember so clearly, sitting there in my seat and just saying, wow, that's perfect, that's exactly right. The way that they managed to capture the sort of the visual effect of Middle-earth, just wonderful. But I think as far as the question of pure adaptation goes, that is to say, to me, what is really cool about adaptation is the kind of interaction with the text, and the sort of imaginative interaction with the text that I was talking about. And as far as that goes, I think I like Lotro best. And in particular, what I'm really interested in what Lotro does is the way that they adapt stories indirectly. That is, the way that they build their own stories, right? Characters that they're making up and plot lines that they're inventing because they're not just, rehashing the events of the books. And yet they are using those as moments to explore, both sometimes to tell some of the untold stories that are lurking around the edges of Tolkien's books, sometimes to sort of examine and get us to re-examine stories. I'm thinking, for instance, I was just talking about this recently at one of our Mythgard weekly or bi-weekly events recently, but I've just been doing, I'm still not quite done yet with Volume 2. I haven't gotten to Gondor yet, Terry, so I'm still in Moria, and but thinking of the plot of the dwarves in Moria and the way in which, of course they're inventing that entirely, it's their own story, but the way that interacts with and gets us to think about both the story of Balin's failed expedition, right, and what lay behind the very few details that we get about the failed attempt of Balin to retake Moria, and the way that in itself opens up, thoughts about dwarvish mentality and why they do what they do, and this, I find it really evocative, that is, in how they prompt us to think about those stories. They have clearly themselves done such careful thinking, not just attention to detail, which their attention to detail is very good, but the way they're really thinking in really interesting and I think very, very creatively and intellectually stimulating ways about the stories that Tolkien wrote and didn't write, and weaving them together. I think it's really very cool. So that's why I have been enjoying Lotro's adaptation of Tolkien even more than the sort of the somewhat more straightforward kind of adaptation that the films attempted to do.
And you can't quest with Corey in Lotro. Because not only does he read all the quest text, but he actually, like, if you guys remember the quest where you go through Sambrog, Tom Bombadil sends you into the Great Barrow, he took more time going through that barrow, looking at the writing on the wall. I mean, it's great, but it's like, don't go questing with him, because he's going to look at every, look at this
I was trying to figure out whose barrow that was, and if you could place, like, from what period of time that particular barrow was from, because it was
who just
not
stuck
an
the king,
barrow.
Stuck this king over there on his throne, and he to like rot away and become a skeleton, and it was
really
right.
weird. That was really weird.
Or we took him to Goblin Town, and he was busy looking at all the interior
Oh, the
decoration.
goblin art! Oh man! Oh yeah, forget
That was a
the
fun tour.
deeds. You know, yeah. But I could have spent even longer looking at that goblin art. Was fascinating. Oh man!
Sounds like I should start playing Lotro so I can be Corey's questing partner.
Oh
Oh,
man,
you
there's so
got
much
it. Oh
stuff
my
to look
gosh,
at.
you
Yeah.
definitely should.
You guys
Yeah.
are a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I've been doing a live stream on Turbine's Twitch channel every Friday afternoons, kind of just going through and kind of indulging myself, such as when the one day that my 7-year-old, the one who used to be 4 and is now 7, decided that he would watch my Twitch broadcast live one day, but it happened to be the day that I was going in debris and I got completely distracted looking at the walls, like where you can see the ruins of the old Arnorian walls and where you can see the newer like hedge or ivy grown walls of Bree, and what that suggests about the construction history of Bree that they establish, and how you can kind of reconceive of the political history of Bree through the Second Age and the Third Age as the game designers haven't developed it. And I totally lost my 7-year-old afterwards. I came up and he's playing video games again, and he's like, I watched for a little while, but you talked about walls for like 4 hours, and it so,
Yeah, I know how that feels.
I can only take 3 hours worth of wall talk.
yeah,
4 is too much.
exactly, yeah. So, but anyway, it's just, I find that's why I've been so interested in Lotro and what they've been doing, because I do find that level of thoughtfulness, the way they have thought through Middle Earth as a secondary world, and the way they have both been willing to talk about kind of living in that middle area, right, of not just sort of being a slave to the text and not just leaving the text behind and using it as sort of a pretense to do your own totally unrelated thing. The way the Lotro people have really lived in that middle space is, I think, totally exemplary. It's really, really interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, my least favorite moment of adaptation is probably the way that Peter Jackson handled the Smaug battle at the end of the second film.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's one rule that I keep going back to when I'm rethinking about how I evaluate that scene, and it's that you shouldn't be overshowing the villain. And you especially shouldn't be overshowing how the villain can't kill dwarves. Especially after you had shown a long time ago of, at the beginning of that opening shot where they show, how devastating Smaug is to the dwarves, and then somehow this company of 13 can't even get a singed beard. It's just, it's like, how does that even happen? And so it was very frustrating. Plus there's the whole molten gold wheelbarrow thing that's a metal wheelbarrow, and even if it was wood, it would be catching on fire. So it's just, the entire scene just feels like that they threw logic out the window, and in some cases that can be translated to the whole film, but I think that it was worse done in this scene because Smaug is the big single villain of the core book of the film, or of the core book, and in the film he's almost just like a joke, and it was very disappointing that you have that big intro building him up, and then you're just disappointed when he actually fights the company. And that was very frustrating. I did like how they handled Bilbo with Smaug, just like how I loved how they did Gollum and Bilbo.
Yeah.
Because this isn't my pick for my favorite moment, but real quick, the interaction between Gollum and Bilbo in the films is interesting because it's Andy Serkis is Gollum doing the book Gollum almost line for line. And so it changes the way that it comes on screen, but it's still the same dialogue, and I thought that that was really interesting. My favorite adaptation, though, has to be Lotro's Rohan. They've fleshed it out so well, and I just love the stories that they tell there. They change to a different type of questing, and they go really, really in-depth into the history of Rohan, and they really make it seem like a kingdom that is being divided and torn apart in a way that they couldn't do anywhere else because there aren't any kingdoms that are existing. And so it was really interesting to see the politic dynamics combined with how they made each and every single city feel individual and different, which, me personally, I can't say the same for Gondor, but they still did a great job with Gondor. All right, that is enough talking for sure. So let's go ahead and end this out. So first of all, thank you, chat room, for sticking around with us. That
Yes, thank
is
you.
awesome. You guys are great. So let's actually go around and have everybody plug their stuff. And reminder to send me an email after so I can put it in the description, where you guys that are watching can actually find all this stuff that they're saying verbally now. So Corey, how can people find your stuff?
Well, primarily at mythgard.org, mythgard.org. That's where you can find links to the Film Project website there. You can find links to the Tolkien Professor. My webpage is tolkienprofessor.com. Though you can find links to there on the Mythgard page as well. So yeah, I'd start with the Mythgard page.
Awesome. All right, Aaron.
You can find us pretty much anywhere on social media and YouTube as Pixelich. I'll put a link in the chat as well. If you would like to watch our lore series or our Did You Know series, as well as whatever, I got some other stuff on the channel too. I just did a video about where I dubbed over 2 cats talking about Fantastic Four. So yeah, if you'd like to see that, it's youtube.com/pixelich, and that's lich spelled like glitch with no G.
All right. Ron, how can people find your stuff? Uh-oh, he might be frozen.
Did we lose him?
I think we did.
He looks bored. Oh
All
no,
right.
what a bummer.
Terry, how can people find our stuff?
Well, you can follow this channel right here, PVMP Andang on YouTube. Our Middle-earth lore series comes out there. You can also find us by going to lotroplayers.com, where you'll find lots of Lotro-related things and some additional Tolkien-related things. You can follow me personally at Terry Adwin on Twitter, which is basically the only way you're going to find me.
All right. I would like to mention that you can also find us by going to middleearthlore.com with or without the hyphen. It'll redirect you to Lotro Players, the Middle-earth lore section on lotroplayers.com. So you can find all our stuff there. You can also follow us on Twitter at middleearthlore for that kind of stuff, and you can follow me at pvmp_andang. You can find all of, well, not all of Ron's stuff, but you can find Rise of the Fellowship on Netflix. You can also find it in stores. They're still selling it at Walmart. I saw somebody recently had found it still at Walmart, so they are still selling it in stores. And you can also go to the Forge Studios, and they have a YouTube channel amongst other things. And you can actually find Ron's stuff there, plus the other projects that he is promoting. Because he's actually started a thing to help promote indie works and help film those, which is really cool. And so they'll actually take script ideas and help people create films through that, which is a really awesome effort that they're doing there. All right, and you can also find the links that he'll provide in the description as well. So thank you all for joining us.
Hey, what about me? What? Hello? Gee whiz! Because Corey forgot something. So,
well, plug away.
So you can get the Grifflips Friday streams.
Yes.
We put up on our own YouTube channel, and so the YouTube channel is Mythgardian, MYTHGARDIAN. So Mythgardian is where you could, and you could also see him give the entire announcement of the Film project that he gave last January.
Yes.
The whole hour and a half of it is on YouTube, but if you want the shorter version, it's on the Film page, so you can see it there as well. But he does a really good explanation of the whole Film, and I am at Tolkien Maven on Twitter.
Yeah, and my Twitter is at TolkienProf too, so people can reach me there also.
All right, awesome. And Kathy from the chat does say that the Forge Studios are on Facebook and Instagram, where you can follow them as well.
Oh, great. Excellent.
So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us for our first Tolkien adaptation chat, or adapting Tolkien. Yeah, and hopefully we will see you guys again for maybe another talk sometime in the future, in a few months or something.
We want to check back in a year and see if you still want to be doing this, Andy.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to check the links in the description to follow all these awesome people. But till next time, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you again real soon.
Cheers.
Bye.